Our guest today is Carol Kelly, who is an attorney in Springfield and a resident of Washington County, who also is the president of the Washington County Historical Society.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Among other things.
Among other things, definitely. So, and we're going to talk about lots of things. So,
Okay.
But Carol, first I would like to ask you, because as you've been active with the Historical Society for as long as I've known you, and you are from this county, and your ancestors are from here. So, needless to say, you know a lot about the history of Washington County.
Yes. I know something about it.
Yes, plenty. So, and I think that I'd like for you to share a little of that knowledge with us today.
Do you want me to do a stream of consciousness, or do you have questions you would like for me to answer?
Well, first of all, I want to know about the Historical Society itself.
The Historical Society has been around in one form or another since the 1930s. It was first formed for the purpose of creating Lincoln Park. It was the organization that would arrange for the construction and finance the acquisition of land to build the original Lincoln Park. It came back into existence, or it came into greater activity when the Mordecai Lincoln House over there was being acquired and renovated and done over. Again, it requires a local entity or agency to organize these things, promote them, and to some extent finance them, and also to take some responsibility for them after they're created. Beyond that, the Historical Society meets. It has anywhere from 12 to about 50 members, depending on how you want to count them. There are about a dozen people who tend to come to the meetings, but have been as many as 50 people in other counties around the state and around the country who are members and would get the newsletters and things like that, but who had actually never actually come. But they wanted to have access to the newsletters. The Historical Society has been primarily a place where people who are like-minded on history get together and they swap stuff. It's amazing how many things you can pick up at a Historical Society meeting. Oh, I was up in Harrisburg and I got this thing and I made copies of it. Everybody gets a copy of it. I was in Louisville, we were at this meeting and they gave all these things out, so everybody gets a copy. I have a stack of stuff that we pick up. It's the opportunity to exchange interest in historical events and places and things like that.
Things that are pertinent to Washington County.
Yeah, Lincoln history mostly, but also the history of other members, other families whose came in the period from about 1780 up until the time of the Civil War. I have ancestors who are Cunninghams, I have ancestors who are McElroys, I have ancestors who are Duncans. And they would, and I got this letter here from 1830 from some of my great-great-great-grandparents. So that will be copied and handed around the room, and everybody gets a copy of that to take home with them. So that kind of thing. Also, the Historical Society has tried to sponsor a number of events. The recent reenactments of the Lincoln wedding out at Lincoln Park were largely sponsored by the Historical Society. In fact, there's a tape of the first of the wedding reproductions about 7 or 8 years ago. I saw it on television the other night. It's available. You want to buy it. They have a little sign there that says, "You want a copy of this tape? Send so much money to us, and we'll send you a copy of it." So that reenactment out there was put on the Historical Society. The Historical Society also tries to do has sponsored house tours and things of that sort around Christmas time. The Historical Society it would be nice if people could do original research and publish a journal, but that is probably beyond our capabilities. We get together to exchange information and maybe work on a project now and again. However, that history book, the 1992 Bicentennial History Book, was a Historical Society project. It was a large, expensive, and very difficult project put together, but the Historical Society did pull that off.
What did you say? What year was that?
Well, it's a Bicentennial History Book. The county was created in 1792, and so in 1992 we produced this history book of the county. To the best of my knowledge, none are currently available for sale. It had about half of the pages, about 400-page book, about half the pages are family history. Individual families wrote up their own history. They submitted Mary Jo McGuire, deceased now, but who at the time made sure that they were in the correct English, and also no outlandish and unsupportable claims were made. And then they were printed in this history book. And then several of us wrote a narrative history of the county to fill up the first section of the book. And so I think about 1,200, maybe 1,500 of them were printed. None are for sale currently. I still have one, and most people around town who are interested in history have one. There may be a few of those available for sale, because a number of those books, as well as several other books that were available, were reprinted about 5 years ago. And Carolyn Harden at her jewelry store is where you would go to buy them. And some of the Bicentennial books may still be available, but none of the Orville Baylor books are available anymore.
Now, can you, are both of those on at the library where you can?
I believe the Orville Baylor books at the library, and I believe that the Bicentennial books at the library as well. I believe that. So I haven't been there lately. I spent a lot of time up there when we were writing it, but I haven't been up there lately, so I do not know what exactly is in. If it's there, it's in their non-circulating section, where you can go and look at it there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know the Bicentennial book that the Hayden family that I'm a part of did not participate in that, didn't enter any information.
Yes.
And since then, I've learned lots of information about, like my father-in-law's, his father's siblings, and some of them are in Nelson County,
Right.
And at the time, you know, I mean, I didn't know some of that information, and it's just interesting how you can, you know, you find out that kind of stuff. So, and sometimes it's just, I mean, oftentimes it's just random, I think, coincidental,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yes, it is. And sometimes you'll bump into someone that you didn't know, and you may ask where you're from. I'm from Washington County. Oh, well, I'm from Washington County too. Well, as you talk, you discover that you're ninth cousins or something, because you have great grandparents in common. Yeah, that does happen quite a bit.
Yes. And then you share your history with each other, or what, you know, I've met people that I've shared my family's history, or they'll say, well, I'll send you information on that side of the family that I'm related to.
Yes.
And that's very interesting, you know, to get that, I think.
That's right.
So, and now, are you all meet monthly?
Monthly, typically, yes, here in this room.
Okay. And if someone is interested in becoming a member, they should contact you?
They can contact me or any member, or they can simply come by a meeting. We always try to give notice by putting something in the briefly section of the paper. Historical Society meeting will be held on. And then we, within the Historical Society, we have a secretary who gives notice either by email or phone call to the members.
Who's that?
Martha Young.
Okay, well, that is good. And so you, of course, have had an interest in history for a long time, and you are from Washington County, and as were your ancestors.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that.
About my ancestors in the county?
Your father was raised here.
Yes.
And your grandfather.
The first Kelly to arrived in 1806. That was John Kelly. And he had crossed the Atlantic in 1798. And he had...
From
Ireland. And in those days, there was no North Ireland, no Erie. It was simply part of Great Britain. But he lived in Down County, which is near Belfast. It's currently in North Ireland. he lived there, and he came here by ship. We assume he came to the port of Baltimore, and he arrived here in 1806. He purchased a house that had been built for Josiah Lincoln, Mordecai Lincoln's brother, Thomas Lincoln's brother. The house may have been built by Richard Berry, who was a tradesman, craftsman who built anything. He could build warehouses, he could build homes, he could build flatboats. He lived at Port Town, and he had a small mill there. He had a boatyard there, and
now is that the Berry that
it
where
was his father. At Lincoln Park, you go in, you look. There's a house called the Berry House. That house belonged to Francis Berry, and it was moved to that location right after World War II. It was his father who came first, and that was Richard Berry. His house is where Willis Walker used to live. It's still standing. It's about halfway between the existing Lincoln Park and Port Town. And it's a large white house on the right. It's been for sale. It's been sold several times. I think it's for sale now. But if you stand right in front of it, on the right side, if you go in on the right side, there is a house within a house. In other words, there's a log house on the right side, has its own stairway and its own upstairs and everything. And the house was expanded back and over. That was Richard Berry Sr.'s house. He was a builder, and he could. I think he even employed young Thomas Lincoln to build a mill over in E-Town back about 1797, somewhere along in there. In any case, he was a local builder, and he put up a number of the houses in the area down there. But John Kelly purchased a house from Josiah Lincoln in 1806, and the house is still there. Powell Boone lives in it now.
Oh, really?
That's his house.
Now, Josiah was Thomas Lincoln's brother?
Mm-hmm, and Mordecai Lincoln's
and
brother.
Abraham's father.
Well,
I mean,
Thomas, yeah.
Thomas was his father.
Thomas was his father. Josiah would have been his uncle.
Right.
And they sold that house and 100 acres to John Kelly in 1806. And in 1811, Josiah Lincoln sold another 60 acres to him and left the county. That was the last Lincoln to live here, was in 1811. He sold 60 acres to him. If you've been to my house, there's a plank fence in front of the house. Next field over that is the 60 acres that he acquired at that time. The 100 acres, though, was where Powell Boone lives now. And but it remained in the Kelly family until 1945, and it was expanded by the intermediate Kellys along the way. In any case, John Kelly had a number of children. He had 11 or so children, I think is how many he had. About half of them lived to adulthood. And one of them's name was Dan, and the other's name was John. And the Kelly family kind of split at that point. The John Kelly side would be the Skeets and EO over here. They were on that side. Dan is on that side. The Kellys in Lebanon are on that side of the family. And our side of the family would be, you probably would not know these people, but they live down on the Bloomfield Road this very day. Steve Kelly has a farm down there.
Oh, of course.
And Pat Kelly has a farm down there, and Mike Kelly has a farm down there. Those are on our side. Those are the descendants of the Frank Kelly side of the family. I used to say that the John Kelly side, Dan's people, they got all the looks and the money, and we didn't. So in 1945, Lewis sold that house, and it's I think Albert Rudd used to live there for a while, and then it became Powell Boone's house. But after they acquired that house in 1806, and then 1811 they acquired the land in front of the house, they kept buying land in all directions. And at one time the Kellys had about 1,200 acres down there, and we have 170 of it, and Steve has about another 350 of it. So there's still about 500 acres of our land down there.
And you still farm?
Yes.
And you have quite a bit of acreage.
170 acres, yeah.
And so you have, do you lease the land, or
Not yet. We still run it ourselves.
you run it yourself?
We've raised
Now,
about-
Carol, how do you do that and
hire
practice
somebody to do it. You hire somebody to do it.
Do you get out there and do you have cattle?
Yes, we have about I guess there's probably about 80 down there right now.
So you have to get out and feed those cows?
I tell you, I hired somebody to do that.
Uh-uh.
We stopped baling hay a few years ago and started rolling it.
Okay.
So about every other day, then it was cold winter months, Richard Raley would show up down there, and he would haul 2 or 3 rolls of hay out to them.
Oh, well, that
So
was
you got
good.
your automatic farming that way.
And Richard helps you then.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And but you, of course, practice law here in Springfield,
Yes.
and have your office on Cross Main, and that's a historic building in and of itself.
It dates back probably to about 1900. If you look at the building, you realize it's the same design as Robertson's and even this building. It has a Richardsonian Romanesque style to it with the arches and the rough stone. It dates probably back to about 1900. My aunt, Margaret Kelly, who was on the another side of the family, she told me that she was the secretary of the water company back in the 30s, and the headquarters of the water company was in that building. So she remembered working in there. But the person who had it before me was Pat Grigsby. He got it sometime around 1950, I believe.
Okay. Pat was he the county attorney?
Yeah, he was a lot of things. He was county attorney among them, yes.
Okay. And so you still, and I suppose you've been involved in making sure that we keep our past alive, and and making sure that we keep our buildings intact. And
well, when I was growing up, the past was all around you on every side. My father, he had been born in a log house.
Who now?
My father was born in a log house in 1900. So, and he grew up on a farm where totally run by mules, and so my father and his father were both breeders of mules. That's what they did for a living. They had a jack down there, and people would bring their mares to the jack or to the stallion. If you wanted a horse, you brought to mate with the stallion, and if you wanted a mule, you brought it to mate with the jack. And I still have the stock books. If you wanted to breed a mare to the jack, nowadays you want to breed to a son of Seattle Slew, it'll run you around $300,000. If you wanted to breed on our farm in the 1920s, it would cost you $3.
oh my goodness.
So we had a large operation of breeding mules and mares down there, and that's what they did, their primary source of income up until after World War II. And then by then tractors came along, and so the mule business and the horse business kind of fell apart. So we started raising cows.
Yeah. Well, you also had a road down, you indicated before, on your farm that was a toll road.
Not on it. That the short line road, which ran from runs down where Valley Hill School used to be up to where it's now Lincoln Park. I believe that was a toll road at one time. And my father told me,
which were private roads
yes.
that people would have to
there was
pay
there was
the
toll
owner
gate.
of the,
There was toll gate, yeah.
Yeah.
Washington County had about 200 or 300 miles of toll roads at one time. And that road, my father told me years and years ago, he said it was a plank road, which means it had a wooden deck. It's like a bridge deck on it. And there was a toll gate, literally. The bowl down across it. You drive up there, they would count how many horses you had, how many mules, or chickens, or whatever you wanted to drive down the road. And they would charge a little fee, and then they raised the toll gate. You could use the road. Most of the roads radiating out of Springfield in those days were toll roads. There was a toll road to Danville, to Lebanon.
And mostly privately owned, so that, or who would own, did the county own them?
It was kind of like this. When the first one was created, which ran from Springfield to Bardstown, it was entirely privately owned. The right-of-way was privately owned, and all the work was done to rebuild it. To construct the road was privately done, privately paid for. They would sell stock at the courthouse up here. That's how they got their money. But later on, not all toll roads were highly profitable, and so the county started taking a position in the roads, you might say. We'll buy the first $5,000 worth of stock if you can sell another $5,000 privately. Also, they started using the dirt roads as the right-of-way for the toll roads. So you would have a dirt road, that's what they call them, dirt road, which would be a county road. And they would grant a franchise to a company to build a toll road on what was a county road. And a turnpike company would typically try to pave the road with gravel, put in covered bridges, in place of just a ford of some kind. And
pave it, you mean just gravel?
Macadam or gravel or cobblestones. They use cobblestones on the road from here to Bardstown.
Really?
Yeah, and but macadam and gravel were used because before then they didn't call them dirt roads for nothing. They were dirt roads. There was no surface on a county road in the time of the Civil War. It was just a dirt road. And once a year, the road supervisor, who was appointed by the county judge, would send out a summons, roughly the equivalent of a jury summons, and all the people who lived along the road were required to show up on a given day with their mules and their axes and their shovels, and they would work on the road. For about 2 weeks or so, they would try to repair the ruts and fix the culverts and washouts and all of that. That was one of your little obligations. And people living in the 1930s remember still being called out to do that. E.O. Kelly told me that his father got summons, and he went out there, and they would spend a day breaking rock to build a county road. They didn't have a county road department in those days. The people who lived along the road were responsible for repairing them and building them. And so that still left you basically with a dirt road. And so when turnpikes got going big here just for the Civil War, the idea was that every major road that led out of Springfield would be improved. And so you would divide, typically the county would buy a portion of the stock, and the public would buy a portion of the stock, and then they would pave the county road, build a covered bridge, put in new culverts and whatnot, and they would toll gates up at each end, and they would charge. And toll road companies were not notoriously profitable. That's one reason why the county started buying into them, because it was hard to get people to buy into them. They weren't very wisely run, because if you put a toll gate here and you live there, that's about a mile that way, you got to go through the toll gate to get Springfield, to get cigars or something, and then pay the toll gate to get back. So the public at large developed a strong antipathy for toll roads. They didn't like them at all. And so the neighbors who lived along
I agree 100%.
The neighbors who lived along them would start allowing people to cross their farm to get around the toll gate. They called them shun pikes. We want to shun
the toll road.
So the toll roads ended up being used almost exclusively by large cartage companies and stage lines that moved the mail and the express. But one time before the railroads came, there were toll roads leading out of Springfield to Danville, to Lebanon, to Newmarket, all the way to Campbellsville. There was another one, I think, that ran to New Hope, sort of Loretto. Another one ran to Bardstown. There's one to Bloomfield Road was a toll road. The road to Willisburg was a toll road. The road to Mackville was a toll road. And one thing that toll roads did is that they improved the quality of the bridges, because the toll road company built a covered bridge across Parker's Run at the Berg. They also built one across the Beach Fork at the Berg, and
and you have the covered bridge still. I suppose they built the one at Maud.
Yes, that one across the Chaffin River was turnpike built too, as was the one that was burnt down across the river, across the hill from it.
How old is the one that is out there now?
Probably in the 1870s or 1880s.
It's the only one we have left in the county.
But it used to be there were three from here to Bardstown, one on Cartwright Creek, one on Parker's Run, and one across the Beach Fork. And they lasted into the early part of the 20th century. That steel bridge at the Berg was replaced, the covered bridge at the Berg.
Oh,
And
okay.
there's another one, and the turnpike ran all the way to Louisville, and they have a bridge over Salt River down there too. If you ever have occasion to cross Salt River down on your way to Mount Washington, look off to the right, way over to the right, you'll see an ancient rock embutment over there where the covered bridge was attached to the.
Okay.
And so, and the result of this was that Springfield became, for a short period of time, kind of a crossroads, because the large cartage companies, with large numbers of oxen pulling a train of wagons, would pass through Springfield on a regular basis, and they filled up the taverns and hotels and whatnot here. So Springfield had a little brief life as a crossroads in the age of turnpikes.
So very popular city we were then.
Yeah, we were.
I guess that's when you had the hotel over here, which was the Walton Hotel.
That hotel came much later. At the time, you had the Springfield Hotel. It was the primary one. Across the road here to where Skeets Kelly used to have his drugstore there, and where the grocery Mordecai's, I still think of as Ward McCummon's IGA, but those two buildings were not there. The Springfield Hotel stood right there.
Okay, the Springfield Hotel.
The hotel stood right there, and they had their own livery stable behind it. If you go down beside Mordecai's, there's that parking lot, right?
Right.
When I was a kid, there was a large green barn at the upper end of that parking lot, and that large green barn was what was left of the livery stable of the Springfield Hotel. And so there was a hotel there. And
well, I want to know about, was the Tatum Springs Hotel there?
It was built around 1890.
Because that was
the railroad,
obviously movie stars and everything, I understand, came to that.
It was a railroad base, because by then there were railroads in most directions.
1890.
About 1890. So there was a railroad to Lebanon by then. There was one to Springfield by then. There was one to Harrisburg, Danville. And what you would do is you would get off the train and you would find a bunch of buggies out there and say, Tatum Springs, and the driver would take you to Tatum Springs. And Albert Goatley told me when he was young, that's what he did. He would wait with a buggy down at Springfield Depot down here in the 20s, and they would ride people out to Tatum Springs. And Tatum Springs was a spa, basically. It was not a spa, it was not a bathing spa, it was a drinking spa. They had mineral water. And so the mineral water, which supposedly had a curative effect on a seriously upset stomach. If you had ulcers or something, you could take that, and theoretically it would cure your medical ails. I don't know if it had an FDA or Food and Drug Administration ever approved, but that's when the hotel was built, and that's what it was for. And it remained as a hotel probably sometime around 1940 when it went bust. And of course those kinds of hotels were a part of the Victorian era, and they were all over the country. There's a huge one up Mackinac Island is still standing, 10 times bigger than the Tatum Springs Hotel.
Right.
But they kind of faded out. One thing, railroads began to make it possible for people to go to Florida for vacation, so they didn't want to come to Tatum Springs. And so in the 30s, it faded out and was purchased by the Bingham family, and it became the Bingham 4-H camp, which is how it managed to survive. Most of the hotels like it disappeared. Were torn down, burned down, abandoned, but it survived.
Was that the Bingham family out of Louisville?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
They bought that building, and it became a 4-H summer camp.
Right.
For a great many years, and they closed that one probably around 1965. I can still remember going out there when it was
Yes.
And then after that, it just kind of fell down and fell down and fell down.